Welcome back to round 8 of the DreamHack Swiss, where I'm joined for the first time today by the man that keeps us all, me specifically, on our toes. It's Derek Brown. How you doing, Derek?
I'm doing good. It's nice to finally actually be casting some Hearthstone today. I've been hanging out with all the pro players in the crowd, watching some of the matches, despairing, rejoicing at some of the plays and misplays that we've seen throughout today. But it's been an absolutely fantastic day. We had, at the end of yesterday, a pretty good look at how things were shaping up, but now we're really getting down to the nitty-gritty. We're in a win and in match here, and we're starting to see who's going to be in our top 16 and who is sadly going to have to be trying their luck in the side event.
So what have you seen that you've particularly liked over the last couple of days, Derek? Have there been any players that have really impressed you?
I mean, out of the kind of practice groups, I suppose, that we've seen, the main winners that we saw, at least at the end of yesterday, were the players all with the same lineup, who I believe was Muzzy, Just Saiyan, and all the players from F2K in Pheno, Ball Control, and Glazer, where I think with their lineup in games, they were 21-4, or in series at least, sorry, which is a truly staggering record for any deck, or for any lineup. So they've clearly put in a lot of practice. It's not going quite so well for some of the players now, as Saiyan, I think, has dropped a couple of games. But Boar and Muzzy, I think, doing very well. So potentially seeing a couple of those players in the top 16.
Funny that how Fade to Karma and Tempo Storm are the top 2 players on the team standings, and they've been working together and practicing together. That does show just how talented these players are and how good that group is just at synergizing together and practicing.
That's right. But in terms of this particular series, we're going to be looking at 2 players who are both 6-1, so 1 more victory, and we will be seeing them later on today in the top 16, and it's going to be Akawonder versus Sjow, 2 very prominent streamers and personalities in the Hearthstone community, as well as obviously both very proficient professional competitors as well. And they've both got 2 pretty different lineups, actually, to take things into this first series of the round 8 of Swiss. Pretty different archetypes and strategies we're seeing from both of these players.
Yeah, 2 very familiar faces as well. I just want to jump in and add that Akawonder was literally playing the last game on stream. He has not had a break from the public eye, and Sjow, he was on stream just a little bit earlier as well. But honestly, I think everyone watching should know these guys fairly well. Akawonder from Spain has been around for a long time. Probably his most famous moment was his victory at HCT with multiple Cthulhu decks. It was Cthulhu this and Cthulhu that, when Cthulhu wasn't all that popular at the time at all. And Sjow is a huge streamer. He's been around for the longest time. I imagine you've watched a lot of Sjow stream, Derek. Yeah,
he's very, very popular indeed, and with good reason. He's one of those streamers, you know, kind of like Pheno, Sjow, Dog, very popular, but also always hitting those top legend ranks with decks that are not necessarily at the absolute peak of power level, although they also obviously know how to play the top decks as well. Because from Sjow here, we've got a lineup that's a little bit not the most standard style of play, a little bit more aggressive than what we're seeing from a lot of players, favoring the odd rogue, which from the vast majority of players has fallen by the wayside, because given the popularity of Taunt Druid and even Lock, most players are feeling that Miracle is a better way to go with rogue, because you get all those spiders, those giant Edwins, those crazy scenarios where you can't really lose. But odd rogue is a little bit more even, you know,
no,
an interesting choice of words, a little bit more standard in how it works out. I don't know, you don't have those crazy spikes in power when you get the perfect draw, but it is obviously an incredibly quick and aggressive deck, which, you know, to be honest, is not the style of play that Sjow is most known for.
Odd Rogue is also very difficult to play. I mean, I know you've played a lot of Miracle Rogue yourself, so you may have a different opinion on this, but I would maybe argue Odd Rogue's a little bit more difficult, because you've got a lot of cheap minions to play, you've got to work out how to space them, when to play the Cold Blood, etc. What do you think about that? You think Miracle Rogue's harder? Oh, no, he's out of here. Okay, all right.
I'm, of course, joking.
Deeply cut you down.
A die-hard, Miracle fan at the moment. I like the deck a lot. And Odd Rogue, as you said, it tests different skills. And any deck that's less powerful, I would argue, tends to be a bit more difficult to play, because you have to find scenarios when you are not given free wins. Whereas with Miracle Rogue, sometimes you are just given those victories that you get the right draw. But generally, I would say, you know, it tests different skills. But as with both decks, they have fairly similar matchups. You're still looking to stick Cold Blood on certain minions, get Leroy for surprise lethals, and against some of Akawonder's decks that he's got in here, that could be a real possibility for Sjow, because if he takes out one of the more anti-aggro control decks, like maybe the Taunt Warrior or the big spell Control Mage, then some of his more aggressive decks like the Even Shaman and the Odd Rogue could just be running away with a victory. Because once again, this is a last hero standing tournament. It's about clearing the runway for your one power deck to hopefully sweep through your opponent.
Well, I know you've been speculating a little bit about this, Derek, but you don't have to wait any longer. Picks and bans are in. Let's take a look at them. There's Sjow getting ready to show us his ban. And as you said, it's the mage. You said this to me before the broadcast started, I think. So credit where it's due, you guessed it right.
Right. And I think this is one of the main things that I've learned about Control Mage over the course of DreamHack this weekend. I maybe hadn't considered quite so much, but it seems incredibly obvious when you think about it, is just how good it is against specifically Taunt Druid. Because as a deck in terms of power level, I would argue it's actually not that high. It's got a lot of vulnerabilities. The fact you can only really play one removal card a turn can be very vulnerable against the likes of Token Druid, say. But against the Taunt Druid, when you're polymorphing minions, adding beasts to the pool of dead, adding alternate beasts to the dead beasts they have in their pool so they can't always resurrect Hadronox with the Witching Hour, really boosts your matchup. And it's also obviously very strong against some of the more aggressive decks. So it makes a lot of sense for me.
Vitally as well, the addition of Skulking Geist in addition to the polymorphs
very good.
Means that the Druid can't necessarily sacrifice its own Hadronox. It usually uses Naturalize to do that. Naturalize is gone.
Never can,
So yeah, Hadronox himself typically gets polymorphed.
Yeah, and that does make a lot of sense. But for Akawonder, one of the big differences here, even though we see they both have the Druid left up, Akawonder does not have the more standard Taunt Druid. He's got that Token Druid, which we have seen struggling in a few of the recent matches, to be perfectly honest. We saw Hunter Ace taking a staggering game against the Token Druid from his opponent a little bit earlier on against Scruffy, where he managed to hit double Abomination for his kind of only win condition in that matchup, which was truly staggering to say the least. And then obviously for Akawonder against Pool 8, he got a little bit unfortunate lining up against the Warrior, which is one of the worst matchups for it. But we're going to be getting a look very shortly as we enter into the first game as to how these two players want to start off the game. Yeah,
we're just about ready to get started. The players are about to hit that play button. Win and in, as you said before, Derek. It's not quite losing out, is it? They do get one more shot if they lose in this round of the Swiss and the next round of the Swiss, as they'll only have a second loss. But everything to play for. Let's start this game.
So for both players here, it is going to be the Druid. But once again, not a mirror match, only in terms of classes, not decks. At 4 Sjow, that's a pretty nice hand to get things rolling. Obviously, Wild Growth is always the card you're looking for. But for Akawonder on the other side, Nourish is nice to start ramping up a little bit. But I often find in my experience with this matchup, if both decks kind of do reasonably well, trade tit for tat in the mid game, staying relatively even on the board, the Taunt Druid will eventually come out on top. Yeah, so because of that, in order to win, the Token Druid needs to get a much more aggressive start. Cards like Wild Growth into Violet Teacher, into a bunch of early tokens or an early Whispering Woods before the Taunt Druid has a way of dealing with it. Because, as you said, the later the game goes, if the decks are sort of being neutral with one another, Taunt Druid ends up with a lot of taunts in the way, and it's very difficult for the Token Druid to ever push any damage to the face at that point. That's exactly. And it's not only just the fact that you start to draw through to your taunts, your Hadronox win condition. As the game progresses and Sjow starts to draw more cards with the likes of Branching Paths, Nourish, and Ultimate Infestation, he will start to find his answers to a wide board. He will find Swipe and Primordial Drake in particular, because while there is no Spreading Plague in the Taunt Druid deck, obviously, there will very possibly be the possibility to clear off a wide board of Whispering Wood tokens anyway.
Sjow, another advocate of my favorite card of the weekend. Don't roll your eyes at me, Derek. No, I was rolling my eyes at the draw. Sjow's just managed to go Wild Growth into Oaken Summons into Nourish. Those are pretty good games indeed. And, obviously I've seen, if I'm perfectly honest, players going for Nourish for draw a lot more than I personally would have gone. I'm a big Nourish for mana player. But in this instance for Sjow, it makes a lot of sense. He's got a good, solid play in Sleepy Dragon when he gets round to it. Yeah. And even if that doesn't do it in its own right,
obviously the branching paths will be able to draw him that little bit closer to something like, as we mentioned, Master Oakheart, and probably not Ultimate Infestation, as that's been rotated out of most of the Taunt Druid deck lists.
Yeah, I mean, it's the fact that he's got branching paths in hand is a big reason to ramp up rather than draw. But yeah, nice Scoff. The Lich King is a great card to pick up on turn 8. Funnily enough, though, Sjow's opting not to play it by the looks of things. He really wants to get rid of that Violet Teacher. He's actually valuing that over developing the big 8/8 immediately. What do you think of that?
I mean, like you lined out at the start, if this game goes on and both players are playing reasonably well, none of their real power spikes, Sjow will start to take over. That is simply an inevitability. So just making sure that Akawonder cannot get that blistering start with a Violet Teacher means that Sjow next turn can quite happily play either the Sleepy Dragon or Lich King and be feeling pretty happy.
Yeah, Akawonder now just ramping up with the Nourish. But it's sort of getting to that point where it's a little bit late. Trog Gloomy to really coming into its own here. I think one of the reasons that maybe some of us underestimated this card until now is because we're looking at it as a one-attack minion.
Yeah.
It's sort of not a one-attack minion. It's sort of an infinite attack minion.
I will not hear this argument. I've been listening to this argument since blooming Maetna has been knocking about.
All right.
I totally understand your reasoning. And I guess the fact that I'm underrating it, perhaps, is that in the Taunt Druid matchup, if you have a wide board, you're probably going to be able to either just never die, at which point you'll just value trade after value trade for a victory, or branching paths for lethal, because you just go plus attack. So any minion stuck on the board will be a tremendous amount of damage. But yeah, it's, you know...
to be fair, would Maexna be that bad for Master Oakheart?
Okay, yeah, that would be pretty good. I mean, Master Oakheart is just kind of an argument that nullifies anything. I mean, Dragon Hatcher is not a good card.
True.
Hadronox is not a very good card. You have to naturalize it yourself for it to even be playable. But obviously, when it does work, it becomes truly insane. But in this particular game where Sjow, you know, we've been mostly talking about his plays, but it's been powerful but remarkably standard. It's just curving out as well as possible, dealing with his opponent's threats when necessary. But this, finally, is the turn when Akawonder is going to start powering up his own minions. This is the hurdle that Sjow needs to find a way to overcome if he's going to be able to take this game. Because if he is able to deal with this wide board, he's looking to be in a pretty fantastic spot, as I'm actually just wondering if he has lethal on this turn.
Yeah, that turn from Akawonder was far too late. Anti-Magic Shell is such a big boon for Show's board. He's got branching paths as well. I'm going to keep talking while Derek does the maths.
Yeah.
We got there? He got there?
Yeah,
he's got there.
He just has lethal. I was thinking for this whole time, you know, does he have to overcome something? But he just curved out too perfectly. This is what Druid does sometimes. It's been an expression since the dawn of Hearthstone of just Druid wins. It just finds ways to do the most degenerate things imaginable, and showing why it is a pretty favorable matchup there when it goes perfectly for the Taunt Druid, because Akawonder, he gave it a really good shot trying to stick the Violet Teacher a little bit earlier on. Obviously, that was a very powerful turn he made with Witching Wood into Soul of the Forest, but like you said, just that little bit too late and unable to really get any of the benefit from his cards, because he had like 8 or 9 cards in his hand at the end there, but that doesn't mean anything. That's how we've seen the Token Druid win so consistently. It's the fact that like a third or even more of their deck is just about benefiting on a wide board. So when they can't get that, or it's consistently cleared off by the likes of Warlock or Control Warrior, they just lose.
Honestly, I think that even if he didn't have lethal that turn, it would have been difficult for Sjow to lose that game. He had Oakheart in his hand. That would have been a Dragon Hatcher into another taunt. It would have also been another Ironwood Golem. So he would have had a very wide board of taunts to defend himself from the many tokens on the board. And, you know, the attack can only get so high on the tokens in one turn. We're only looking at something like 7 or 8 maximum. I don't think there was any way Akawonder got past that wall of taunts anyway. So I think we can all appreciate the fact that Sjow just sped that game right up and won immediately rather than drawing that one out.
He did indeed. And now for Akawonder, 2 decks left remaining as this is last hero standing. It's going to be his Quest Warrior and his Cube Warlock, interestingly, not the Even Warlock that we see from the vast majority of players. Although I think looking at the deck breakdown, it's maybe a little bit closer than I first anticipated, like 2/3 of the Warlocks are Even Warlocks, something like that. Basically,
there's a lot of Warlock.
Is a lot of Warlock, and there's a lot of Even Warlock, more so than Cube Lock. But Akawonder, obviously, at a tremendous win rate record here, is doing very well for him indeed. And I imagine that's probably going to be the way he has to go for the warrior. I feel like it's just not consistently able to get off enough damage, just going to be dying to wide boards. Maybe with a cornered sentry knocking about in there, which, okay, there is 2 of in the deck list. Maybe that sways things back in the Warriors' favor.
So I was speaking to Theo about this very matchup yesterday, and he was saying to me on Twitter, he thinks the Druid is still favored, even with the cornered sentries, because far too often, Hadronox just gets on the board early enough, creates a wide board that the Warrior can't deal with. And often, Witching Hour will still work, even with the cornered sentry. It can happen. It depends how quickly the cornered sentries get down. Sometimes Hadronox is just cubed if the Warrior doesn't have an answer for that immediately. So he seemed to suggest that even with cornered sentries, while not as favored for the Druid, it's still favored for the Druid.
Right, and clearly Akawonder agrees going to be lining up that Q block. But this is kind of an interesting one, because I remember, I believe it was in one of Fino's Sjow matches, which he puts on, that's Sjow spelt with an S, it wasn't a match about Sjow, spelt with an H, sorry. But he had this exact matchup, I believe, a Q block up against Taunt Druid. But the difference was, I believe, that it was pre-nerf for the Warlock. And although generally, the main matchups that got a lot weaker for the Warlock were the aggro ones, because it doesn't have the ability to get out early Void Lords. The fact that Lackey now costs 6 instead of 5 is actually a pretty big deal, I find, in this matchup. Not being able to get out those Doom Guards as soon as possible and then go into Cube Pact and start killing the Warlock, sorry, the Druid as quickly as possible, really slows down what you're trying to do. And as we know, if you have a slow game plan against Taunt Druid, you're probably not winning.
Yeah, the Lackey nerf across the board was pretty drastic. Lorinda and I were talking earlier about how suddenly Spirit Singer Umbra on turn 4, even just as a bluff, doesn't work anymore. Because you can't Umbra into Lackey on 5. There's not even the bluff for that unless you've still got the coin in hand or something. So yeah, it's caused a pretty big disaster in this deck. And as you said, in this matchup specifically, as Sjow's hand isn't looking too bad. He's got the Oaken Summons, he's got the 4-mana Taunt to play next turn. He'll go with the Oaken Summons, obviously, first. He's got Dragon Hatcher rather than Master Oakheart. Sjow is also running 2 copies of Dragon Hatcher. That seems to be pretty standard in this tournament.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the way that most players are going. Like you said, it's so important to get that consistency, because if you draw the first one, it's not that bad. You can just play it at a later stage or just ignore it, because you usually have so many cards in hand anyway. But I mean, we've been talking about Sjow's hand, for Akawonder's hand, as it so often feels the way nowadays. This hand is so close to being completely busted. He just finds a skull, or I suppose maybe a Lackey as to a lesser extent. This hand just goes crazy instantly, or even just a Mountain Giant, something to stick onto the board to start getting this pressure down. He would just run away with the game.
Yeah, there's no weapon removal in Sjow's deck, so getting that skull would have been a big turning point for him, as he just goes ahead and Spellstones away that minion. Another minion drawn by Sjow that makes that Oakheart a little bit worse later on, which isn't the end of the world. Like, it's not the only win condition of the deck. It's just a really good way of speeding up the victory for Taunt Druid in any matchup.
And I do just wonder here from Akawonder, with going for the Spellstone onto a pretty innocuous, to be perfectly honest, Ironwood Golem.
Whoa, okay.
Is this a proactive, aggressive enough line of play? Because obviously with this line of play, if he just stalls out the game and draws Skull in the next 2 or 3 turns, he's probably just going to run away with the game. Like, it won't even be close. But in the vast majority of cases, that simply does not happen. You cannot rely on that happening. So although his hand is like every single card you want in this matchup outside of Giant and Skull, I almost wonder if it was worth just going for the Doom Guard, getting it out, because if he doesn't find Skull, the Doom Guard's going to have to come from hand. You want as many Doom Guards resurrected from cooldown as possible. Yeah. And when you have this many good cards, maybe getting rid of a couple of them isn't the end of the world, because you're still incredibly likely to be able to go Cube Pact or Faceless or something like that.
That's true. It's a very tricky decision to have had to make. His hand's looking a little bit nice at this turn. Now he can actually just drop Giant and not discard the best cards in his deck. But even so, he's got to take his time and work this one out. He could tap first. That's an option. tap and then giant, but no.
So weak to naturalize though this
Yeah.
play. Like he would only be burning one card, and obviously burning cards is really the least of his worries here. It's more losing the mountain giant on board, but being able to stick a minion is so important. But I mean, having said that, at the same time, if you play the Doom Guard here from hand, it's still very unlikely to survive until the following turn because your opponent just swipes or spellstones it and it doesn't survive.
Yeah, that's the biggest issue here. It's like he has to accept that regardless of what he plays, it's probably dying immediately. Doomguard dying immediately means exactly no Faceless, no Cube. If the Giant lives, it does have the most health. I guess it is the most likely card to live. Then it can be cubed and Dark Pacted or Faceless or something. So I guess that's the logic he'll have gone with. And again, not tapping there to play around Naturalize.
But then when you start talking about risk versus reward, like how much better is it to cube a giant than a Doom Guard? I would actually argue you'd quite a lot rather get the Doom Guards out because although the stats are a fair bit weaker in terms of attack and health, the charge makes a huge difference. And most important of all, the Gul'dan resurrections are so crucial here because if you're going into the super late game, you don't really want the Void Lords, to be perfectly honest, because their Wall of Taunts will probably beat yours eventually. So going for the Doom Guards and the aggressive plan with Gul'dan will, I think, usually lead you to a victory a little bit sooner.
Now, how about...
Sjow really took his time with that turn before settling on the Naturalize, thinking through every single option. Do you think that's a sign of him not being particularly happy with this play, or just taking the time given to him and playing cautiously?
I think it's just wondering what could my opponent's hand be, where they've only played a giant, obviously, off the top. They've gone for Spellstone on the last couple of turns. And then obviously the main thing for him was, like, what do I do with these cards that don't really do anything? Because while we've been talking about Akawonder's hand not having the synergy to quite work together, Sjow's hand is suffering from exactly the same problem. So by going for this line of play, where he's spending his cards much more aggressively with Nourish into Swipe on the same turn, it gives him the possibility to go for Nourish for Draw instead of Nourish for Ramp, because obviously on this turn, it was a very valid option, I think, or at least something to consider, of going for Nourish for Ramp and then Dragon Hatcher on the following turn. It obviously gives you a pretty good board and a minion that demands a removal, but what it does mean is that your Hadronox is very likely a hell of a lot later down the line than if you go for Nourish for Draw.
We are seeing a lot of the rope in this match. It's clearly a tricky one for both players as they're trying to think through every possibility. Faceless Manipulator on the 3-6 looks so bad, and look at the look on Akawonder's face. He is not happy about that.
He is not happy at all. And to be perfectly honest, I wonder what he's really trying to accomplish with this. Like, how much better is a cube than a Faceless in this scenario? Like, obviously, if you can go cube packed on a giant or a Doom Guard, it's a lot better. Actually, no, that's not even true. If you have a giant on the board and you go cube packed, it's pretty much like strictly worse than just going Faceless, except you get more health afterwards. Like, I think going for just a cube there, perhaps, or like just a Doom Guard or something. Like, eventually, he's gonna have to start throwing these cards out onto the board.
Is there ever a consideration to play Umbra Cube here? No, Void Lord's much better. Just wondering, because that's one way of generating a lot of value very quickly, and then obviously when the cube dies, you get 2 more Ironwood Golems. It's just not a very good card. I guess that's the big issue.
But now Akawonder, as you can see...
Oh, wow. That's a draw.
Yeah, he is not feeling all too happy about this, because this is not what you want to happen whatsoever in this matchup. This is also, I suppose it's worth saying, the downside of playing Cube Lock over the Even Lock instead, because although you have some fairly weak turns in Even Lock where you have to play unactivated Hooked Reavers or just Spellbreaker onto an empty board because you've run out of threats or something like that, the consistency of hitting a Giant into Twilight Drake is so much higher, and you're not left with hands like this where you have to Faceless Manipulator a minion that literally can't even attack for you. It's so dreadful.
This is just nuts. What is going on Sjow's side of the board here? 2 more Sleepy Dragons, 2 more hiding behind the Carnivorous Cube. That is insane. Doesn't really matter what removal Akawonder has.
No copy of Silence even in his deck, so this cube will be going off as well. It looks like, I mean, like I mentioned earlier, you can make a wall of Void Lords, but although we think of Void Lord as this unbelievably oppressive card, which it obviously undeniably was in Hearthstone, in terms of the actual aggressive potential of it or ability to fight back against large minions, it's not that big. It's just how incredibly destructive it is against any kind of normal minion combat, the likes of which the even Paladin was throwing around back when, or even Shaman. Like, normal-sized minions don't get through it. Boards like this just make quick work of it.
Yeah, and the other issue is the Warlock doesn't have a way of buffing everything, really. Like, there's no Mal'Ganis around anymore or anything like that. Whereas the Druid has branching power, Savage Roar, often anti-magic shell, as we've seen. Just as many, many tools available. And okay, Sleepy Dragons on both sides. Let's do this. That is... I am very confused by what is going on in this game, Derek. This is not a regular match of Hearthstone.
It is not indeed, but Sjow still looking to be in a pretty decent position here with Hadronox into Naturalize, meaning as soon as he does start to fall behind on the board, he can just let rip with that. But now, actually, Akawonder has put himself in a position where he is finally able to actually stick one of these big minions. Obviously, it's not one in his deck, it's the Sleepy Dragon instead. Exactly. So all of these clunky cards in his hand he's been messing about with, not really wanting to play, are very likely to actually finally get some value.
If Umbra lives, that Akawonder has 2 more cubes in his hand available to him.
Now,
that is potentially a lot of Sleepy Dragons.
Right.
This is a difficult game to work out. Sjow has got Umbra alive, but doesn't have the space to drop Hadronox and summon a bunch of points.
And at this point, it's just for both players, because both decks are actually remarkably unreactive against big boards like this, because obviously there's no copy of Twisting Nether in the Warlock deck. Lord Godfrey is about as good as it gets, which, you know, you could probably maneuver to become a board clear. But basically, it's about both decks trying to do the most absolutely disgustingly powerful thing they can do as quickly as possible.
Oh. Well, this is already an easy... Hang on, this is... right, it's easy to get to 8 here, so 9, 10. If he can...
Yeah, if you play it, you get to 8. And then you need to get something at 10. Yeah, so it's 9 and 10 is what you need to get to, which doesn't exist on the board at the moment.
The cube spits out 2 Sleepy Dragons. They've got too much health to really interact. The Ironwood Golem can't attack into the healthy Sleepy Dragon. That would have been able to do it if it could. Getting to 9 and 10 is difficult.
Yeah, you can't play Giant. Doomsayer doesn't make a difference. If you go... I wonder if you can actually hit the 9 or 10 value for Godfrey. I mean, for Akawonder, we're focusing on Godfrey because it's the kind of tastiest thing to try and figure out. But whether or not he actually needs to is another question entirely, because we could obviously just see sacrificing off of the cube with, I don't know, maybe a Dark Pact or whatever on this turn. 2 dragons, Sleepy Dragons, will pop out. You cube and pact one of those Sleepy Dragons, you've got a whole bunch more.
All right, so this Godfrey is going to clear everything except the Sleepy Dragons that shows cube summons. Okay, we just got debated big time.
Yeah, that was a turn that Akawonder simply did not have enough time to consider what he wanted to do. He realized if he goes for the Lord Godfrey, because the thing is, his kind of disgusting things he can do, his superpower turns, die with this cube. As soon as his Sleepy Dragons die on his side of the board, what he can do is remarkably less powerful, because he doesn't have the ability to cube and pact these giant dragons. So if he goes for a symmetrical board clear, which would Lord Godfrey would deliver, or not necessarily a board clear, but only leave with like 4-6 or 4-8 Sleepy Dragons, something like that, Sjow would be able to go for something like Hadronox or a cube on one of his own Sleepy Dragons, and he would just start to run away with the game. So Akawonder has to make the most, I think, of what he currently has on board. But to be perfectly honest, I don't think Void Lord was that. I think that was a desperation play because he ran out of time. Maybe should have considered for going something like pact on his own cube, cube one of the Sleepy Dragons, pact that cube again, just to give him the biggest board possible, because here he is just going to be falling so far behind, way too much damage coming through. It's looking like it's not going to be lethal on this turn, but it's a tremendous amount of damage that Akawonder is pushing forward, that Sjow is pushing forward.
All right, well, now the breakpoint is 6. Akawonder can't get a minion that has 5 or 6 health on the board without getting rid of his cube, which is the one that has 1 health on the board. There's a lot of maths for him to do because there's Defile in hand as well. A lot of variables going on here. I can't help but think the Godfrey last turn would have ended up being better than the Void Lord that he did play. I think Derek's right. I think there are plenty of better opportunities that he could have done, given a lot more time to think.
I'm starting to think that the Void Lord play was better than the Godfrey, because the more I look at Godfrey last turn, the less I like it, because as I mentioned, your power plays stop there. You don't, if you're just playing Mountain Giants onto the board, they hit you for 15, 20 damage, whatever, and you just die. You have to keep up with these Void Lord, with these Sleepy Dragon taunts. So on this turn, I think Akawonder once again actually won't be looking at the Lord Godfrey. He will instead be trying to make something happen with cubes, because 2 Sleepy Dragons pop out after this cube dies. Then he can go cube pact again on this turn, or cube Prince Taldaram into pact. Like, you can make such degenerate stuff happen here.
This will be a massive.
Well, he found the break point with Lord Godfrey, at least, using the Defile, but he's ended up with a board that is just as weak as Sjows. And as you said, Akawonder sort of runs out of stuff to do now.
That's it.
Sjow has Hadronox sitting there in his hand, ready to be played, and summon pretty much a full board of Sleepy Dragons at this point.
I don't think that was the way to go, if I'm perfectly honest, from Akawonder. Like I said, he needs to put up a big wall, because he's not going to have the time to play Mountain Giant. And I guess, to an extent, to be fair to him, maybe I'm letting Cast Division, if you will, get to me here, because I'm thinking, Akawonder is probably thinking, hopefully my opponent does not have the power plays that he needs at the moment.
Hang on a second. If Sjow does play Hadronox this turn, which it looks like he is, it's not going to be killed off this turn. Akawonder has Prince Taldaram in his hand. He has cubes. He can actually get a full board of Hadronox himself and a full board of Sleepy Dragons from the Hadronox. Maybe this isn't quite over for Akawonder yet, as Sjow has played right into his hands.
I mean, he's seen both Facelesses at this point, hasn't he? So he's just praying that Prince Taldaram isn't there, I suppose. Clearly we can see Akawonder is going to be running away in terms of value that he has on board. Obviously, his pool is diluted.
Because of the Void Walker, sure.
Yes, but this is like a perfectly reasonable outcome. He didn't get the Void Lord, which would obviously be pretty good, but even then, the Sleepy Dragons, getting both of them is the best scenario.
Yeah, and big issue for Sjow is that Akawonder has a second cube. His Hadronoxes aren't going anywhere. I don't think Akawonder's board is going to be empty for a long, long time. Sjow just complicates things even further by cubing his own Hadronox. Okay. This is not a board state that I like casting, Derek.
Oh, this is what Taunt Druid games will do to a man. And Akawonder, to be perfectly fair to him, I haven't agreed with some of his lines, but he has managed to put himself in a situation where he's utilized his cards that should be used on Giants and Doom Guards in a much more creative manner than this deck would usually allow.
Right.
This is incredibly adaptive thinking that he's having to display here.
I mean, the key turn that I completely missed until he cast it was the Umbra plus Faceless, copying Sjow's cube, summoning the Sleepy Dragons immediately, as that's how the interaction works.
Right.
It was a very well thought out play, and Akawonder got strongly rewarded by Sjow later on, dropping the Hadronox after the mutual board clear. You could argue that in itself was a mistake by Sjow, given that he does know Akawonder's deck list. He will have known Prince Taldaram was an option.
Man, however though, for Akawonder, this appears to be an incredibly stodged up board, which, well, I don't know if that's an Englishism. I don't know if that's a...
Either way, I love it, Derek.
Okay, well, a very clogged up board, I suppose, would be a slightly clearer way of saying it, where neither player is going to be actually attacking face for ages, but I think it's surprisingly volatile in this instance. Like, as soon as Sjow is able to get through even a little bit of attack to face, he will just be able to close out the game, because there's so much attack power on the board here that Akawonder has to be able to activate these Hadronoxes at a moment's notice, which is why he's obviously going for the Dark Pact here right away. The necessity to do so is... I don't know if it's necessarily immediate, because on the following turn he could obviously go double Dark Pact on Cube and then Hadronox subsequently to give himself a full board. But I suppose this gives him a couple of extra attack points on this turn, and he can maybe just damage his own Hadronoxes to the point where they just die.
Yeah, what I think is key from Akawonder here is that he has He knows that Sjow is going to have no way of clearing up both of his Hadronoxes at once. At least one Naturalize, if not both, have already been cast. There aren't enough swipes and wraths and spellstones and things all together in the hand for Sjow to take advantage of the fact that Akawonder has put these Hadronox there. He will almost certainly get the chance to cube another one of these later on.
Sjow there, I think, as I was, spending as much of his turn as possible, just trying to count up if there was lethal, because his branching path picked up off the top. Spellstone in the hand, at the very least, there was a tremendous amount of damage that would have been able to come through, possibly clearing up the game with swipe or something on one of the following turns, but clearly thinking that he's going to have to take this a little bit further into the later stages of the game, which, I mean, hey, he's still got 2 copies of Witching Hour in his hand. He's got plenty of ability to take this a heck of a lot longer.
Akawonder is also on the quiet, so what? No, go on, tell me.
No, nothing. I'm just, sorry, I interrupted.
You're just excited about
this. It's so powerful. What
so much value.
This doesn't happen in Hearthstone anymore.
On the quiet, Akawonder is still searching for that Skull of the Minari. If he can start getting Doom Guards out, at least then there's one extra little push he can generate when he plays Gul'dan later on. So that's something he's sort of looking for, and hey, he's got the time to find it. Almost every minion on his side of the board has Taunt, and the ones that don't are going to be spitting out more taunts anyway.
It's true, but I mean, Gul'dan is subsequently getting a heck of a lot worse with every single Hadronox that comes down, because obviously multiple Voidwalkers being summoned out. And, you know, I'm not going to be the first person in history to say that Gul'dan sucks, because obviously we know, apart from probably Trump in his Trump reviews, I don't think I saw that one, but he probably gave it 1 star, knowing him.
Wow. Is there any way Akawonder can start to push damage to the face yet? It doesn't look like it. That is a solid taunt side of the board from Sjow.
Yeah, and, you know, as we've said, the actual ability for burst damage from the Warlock is significantly lower unless you're able to, I don't know, not discard one of the Doom Guards and play both of them on the same turn. But obviously for Sjow, the onus is on him to probably be delivering lethal in the next few turns, because the real key point here is where it's 2 things. It's one, running out of space on the board is obviously so important here. Like, it's stodging up the board. The cubes and the Hadronoxes themselves are just taking up space from all the taunts that could be summoned. And also, Akawonder might find himself in a situation after he runs out of his second Dark Pact where he is actually unable to kill a Hadronox for a turn on his side of the board. And he won't have enough taunts on board to the point where Spellstone branching paths for plus attack just gives Sjow all the notice he needs to just blow up his opponent with pure burst damage.
It's the type of game of Hearthstone which, as you said, doesn't happen every day, but when it does, it's a real test of these players' abilities and sort of how outside of the box they can think and how they can achieve their own win condition. It's still not looking like Sjow has a means to win the game this turn, but again, that branching paths is sitting there waiting to buff all of his minions' attack and waiting to get that devastating lethal when eventually Akawonder's board is empty, but that still looks like it's a long way away from where I'm sitting.
Yeah, as Sjow literally just plays Nourish for ramp off the top there, obviously just trying to clear out space from his hand for summoning multiple Lich Kings later on down the line.
This is a lot more complicated than a Taunt Druid Mirror. I don't know what this game has turned into.
And I guess what it just comes down to here is who will run out of disgustingly powerful plays first. And I don't know, it's so difficult to tell.
It's pretty close.
Have so many Hadronoxes left.
Yeah, it's pretty close. Akawonder has 3 Hadronox sitting on the board, including the ones hidden behind the cube. But Sjow has 4 Hadronoxes if you count the ones in his hand, thanks to the Witching Hour. So it's quite complicated. Sjow isn't going to have a way of sacrificing the Witching Hour Hadronoxes immediately. I believe all of the cubes are gone now. Please tell me every single cube in both decks is gone. I think I'm all cubed out at this point.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely both from Akawonder's deck. Yeah, I've got to be honest, there could still be another one.
No, please, no.
In Show's deck. I'm trying to think. I think that both have already been played, however. But at least in the immediate, you know, this is...
Ooh, that's not a good board for Akawonder.
I don't know. It's looking to me like Sjow might be pulling slightly ahead in terms of taunts for 2 reasons. One is obviously he's still got 2 copies of Witching Hour, which he can use to massively ramp up the amount of Hadronoxes he's playing. And the second thing is his taunts that he's resurrecting are quite a lot better, actually.
Yeah, especially like given the last Hadronox gave Akawonder almost a board full of Void Ball, because he got the Void Daddy as well, but it's not the same as a bunch of 412s. As even the 1-5s with Poisonous, they are getting some value trades in. They are doing some serious work. As Sjow, yet again, is going to try and work out if there's any way he can get to lethal this turn.
It's looking like it might actually be on this turn. This is very preliminary look at it, but the Void Walker only summons 2. Void Lord only gets 2 Void Walkers. The Trog Gloom Eaters obviously have Poisonous. He's going for it. He can buff up his attack, his armor.
That's going to be it, I think. I mean, let's face it.
Can attack.
Sjow wouldn't be going for this so quickly if he hadn't already spotted
well
it.
over,
so I'm pretty sure we're there. And Akawonder does only have 15 health. He did a very good job of fighting back against Sjow's crazy early board of Sleepy Dragons, but it wasn't enough at the end of what is a game of Hearthstone that I'm not going to forget anytime soon.
Yeah, that was truly one for the history books. I mean, one of the things we've seen in Hearthstone history quite recently is the ability for these truly ridiculous combos has been lessened fairly drastically, I would say. Maybe not so much in terms of these late-game power decks, because we've obviously got Shudderwock Shaman and Taunt Druid, which have nigh on unbeatable endgames. But at the same time, the overall power level of decks in Hearthstone has dropped quite drastically. But there for Akawonder, I do maybe have to wonder myself if he could have played even more greedily in that scenario, because he was making plays like Godfrey for symmetrical board clears when he could have maybe copied more Sleepy Dragons for himself. He played Faceless Manipulator on simply just a copy of the Ironwood Golem, which kind of stodged up his taunt pool in the end as well, because he couldn't actually attack with the minion because he had no armor for himself.
That was such a long time ago. I'd actually completely forgotten that was something that happened in the first game. I couldn't help but smirk just then when you mentioned the power level of decks in Hearthstone have gone down, because it's 100% true. With every rotation, the power level does drop a little bit, but it's hard to think about that with the board states that we just saw in that game. They were some worthy powerful boards. I'm going to cut myself off right there, because they weren't really powerful boards until Branching Paths happened. Sjow's board didn't actually do anything. It just sort of sat there doing nothing. Both of the boards were making horrible trades with each other, thanks to the fact that all of the minions had so much more health than attack.
But again, we are consistently seeing the power of Taunt Druid both today and yesterday being demonstrated.
Yes.
The reason why so many of the pros are just simply calling it the best deck at the moment, because all the kind of combo cards, if you will, it's nice to actually finally be on stream when I'm doing quotation marks. I usually do that off camera. But all the combo cards, if you will, in the Taunt cards just protect you. They're just good minions, because obviously as Hearthstone has evolved, Taunt minions have got better and better. We're not playing with the likes of Booty Bay Bodyguard and Senjin Shieldmaster anymore. We're playing with the likes of Lich King and the Ironwood Golem, which is so powerful. So you don't have to play awkwardly with weird combo cards. You just play, you just curve out, and eventually you have an unbeatable endgame.
Moving forward in this series, Akawonder has his work cut out for him, though. He has to win 3 times with his Taunt Warrior, which we've already established isn't going to be the best matchup against the Taunt Druid that we've just seen dominating the rest of Akawonder's lineup. After that, if he does get the win, he's going to have to beat Sjow's Odd Rogue as well with the Taunt Warrior. And the third deck is that the Even Shaman that wasn't banned? Yep.
And to be fair, it's not the worst set of matchups I've ever seen. Taunt Druid is in a decent spot here, because obviously against the likes of Odd Rogue, Even Shaman, the slightly more aggressive decks, and I suppose Odd Rogue in particular, as it's very burst heavy, much more aggressive deck even than the Even Shaman, Taunt Warrior should be doing very well. It's got a lot of stalling cards, obviously with all the taunts in there, the armor gain and removal. It's really against the Taunt Druid, but I'm a little bit more hesitant, because it obviously has the best case scenario of diluting the pool of beasts with the Raptors from Cornered Sentry. But even then, like you said, Taunt Druid sometimes just does what it happened in the first game, ramps up to Lich King and just wins.
Do you think it's been the best deck in the tournament?
I think for me in particular, at least in terms of what we've seen on stream, obviously talking to some of the players, we're getting different answers. Like certain people are thinking Odd Paladin's very good because it's getting banned so much, or Recruit Hunter is doing so well. For me, it's been Miracle Rogue on stream. I just think it's in such a good spot.
All right.
It's just been doing so well. It's in such a good spot against all the even locks. Like, there's so much even lock in the tournament, and it's kind of the worst matchup for even lock. So I think it's in a very good spot. But I don't know, maybe just for solidity and how consistently decent it is, the Taunt Druid is definitely in a good spot.
We've seen Miracle Rogue completely dominating certain series as well. We saw Casey earlier in a game that I believe Lorinda and I cast together yesterday. He was saying to me before that Mind Blast Priest is one of the best decks in this tournament. He lost with the Mind Blast Priest in game 1 and then just swept with Miracle Rogue. It's like, okay, well, it is Casey after all.
I actually just don't know with Casey and Mind Blast Priest what his thing is, because all he does on Twitter is trash that deck. He said it was only good beforehand because it was good against even Paladin, and it wasn't even that good then, and now he's bringing it, and he's one of the only players to bring it.
He just
I
has
don't
a
even know.
love-hate relationship.
Yeah, I suppose so. It's kind of like me and him. As I love his play, and he just seems to hate me.
Yours. Yeah. Oh, I hate you generally. Okay.
Yeah, pretty generally.
Anyways, it looks like we are going back and getting ready to start game number 3. Can Sjow take this away in a sweep? It looks like he is very well placed to do so, as just giving the thumbs up to the admin, ready to start the game. Akawonder, how does he win this matchup, Derek? What is the, I guess, key plays?
So obviously the main game plan for the Taunt Warrior is a little bit more difficult to manage in this particular game, because you need to be using so many of your removal cards against the likes of Lich King, Sleepy Dragon, that when it comes to the late game and they played their Hadronox, if they're able to get a wide board of minions, your upgraded Sulfurous hero power probably won't even be connecting to the face. And even when it does, they have so much armor gain that you're going to have to get so many hits through to face. It just doesn't really work out. But again, the obvious addendum we have to add on to this every single time is you can just completely destroy what their Witching Hours are trying to do.
Yeah, if Akawonder can get the early cornered sentry, if he does have an execute lined up to beat the Hadronox, then actually there is a very good shot that the Warrior just prevents the Druid from ever getting that incredibly powerful turn and the everlasting value later on.
However, having said that, for Akawonder, this starting hand is pretty blooming good. Being able to go for Acolyte of Pain into Bloodrazor is a great way to start maximizing his card draw, which is obviously of the utmost importance in this matchup. If it's going to Fatigue, then Akawonder is going to be losing anyway, most likely, because it will just be way too much stuff on the board, and taking Fatigue down really will be the least of his worries. So it's about trying to speed things up very drastically, I think.
Okay, Direhorn Hatchling. What do you think he's really looking for with these Stonehill defenders? Just, I mean, the obvious answer is more taunts, but are there any particularly good ones?
I mean, obviously, against the Druid, cards like Corner... Okay, well, Corner Sentry is obviously very nice for even more chance of destroying your opponent's Witching Hour, but cards like Lich King as very big options are never going to be that bad. But I think, to be perfectly honest, what people are realizing, or have realized for quite a long time, in fact, with Taunt Warrior, is the cheaper options are generally just better, especially when you have a very draw-heavy hand such as this one, where you are able to really maximize the amount of card draw. Having cheap options means you get such a quick quest completion that you can start killing your opponent before they can actually activate their game plan.
Yeah, even just chaining Stonehill defenders can be a valid way of using that card and just completing the quest as quickly as possible.
I do kind of wonder in that interaction there with Akawonder why he traded in his Acolyte of Pain into the enemy poisonous minion. Like, obviously he got 2 card draw out of it, which is usually as good as you can expect of an Acolyte of Pain, but it was protected behind a taunt. Even if his opponent had been able to kill off the Acolyte of Pain, it still would have got 2 card draw. Why not just leave it behind? Because then maybe on the following turn, you can lead up with the death rattle of your Bloodrazor and end up drawing 3 cards instead.
Yeah, that's a good point. The only thing I can think of is maybe Akawonder is concerned about drawing too many cards in a world where Sjow was able to squeeze all 3 draws out of Akawonder's Acolyte and then naturalize him or something, but I'm really stretching to say that.
Okay, yeah, maybe naturalizing is a fair point there. But even then, there's no real specific card that Akawonder super cares about burning here, because he's got the Cornered Sentry. I suppose Scourge Lord Garrosh could help him to clear off some of the wider boards. Everything else is just kind of filler, just taunts and removal. There's no real key card that he needs to hit. Kind of wondering at this point, is it worth going for the Cornered Sentry on this turn? You obviously want to weave it in at some point. It doesn't really matter when you get it down, unless you're anxious to maybe get a better battle rage at a later point or something like that. But anytime you can get the death rattle of the raptors or the death of the raptors in your opponent's pool of dead minions is definitely worth it.
Yeah, I don't mind the sentry at all here. It's just a nice way of clearing up everything Sjow has. He ends up with an okay board himself. Solid. It's weird. Neither player is really in a rush to do anything. Akawonder would like to complete that quest when possible. But Sjow is just sort of waiting to get the mana to make the big plays later on. He drops Primordial Drake. Dragon Hatcher, I think there's only a Sleepy Dragon left in Show's deck, and that's the end of the Dragon pool. But he does have Hadronox, he does have Naturalize. I'm not even sure that you want to naturalize your own Hadronox in this matchup, though.
Yeah, it's a lot more worth considering, because obviously no silence, no transform effect in the warrior deck. So the worst they can do is kill it, which is what you would have done on the previous turn anyway. And then if they don't, they are obviously going to be tremendously afraid of it being cubed on the following turn. So the necessity to actually do it, unless you want to guarantee that you have the kind of pseudo charge of having the minion, the Hadronox, die on your turn so you can attack with the taunts right away, it really won't make too much difference.
Yeah, obviously worst case scenario for the Druid is that Hadronox gets executed and then Brawl comes out immediately after.
Good point.
If the Witching Hour pool has already been clogged up by all of the 1/1 Raptors, then that sort of is the Druid's strategy gone. And Akawonder is looking like he is well placed to do that in this match.
Yeah, and you know, it's obviously worth pointing out it's not a given necessarily that Witching Hour won't be able to resurrect
that's true.
the Hadronox itself rather than the Raptors. It's currently a 1 in 4 that Sjow would be able to resurrect it. But even then, he won't even necessarily need it. At the moment, it's definitely looking like Akawonder will be far enough ahead, or at least even enough on board, to the point where one board of Hadronox taunt minions won't be running away with the game for Sjow. But it will be good enough at least to keep him in the game for the moment. But as Akawonder starts to draw more cards, get more taunt minions, Sjow is definitely going to have to start pulling ahead on the board, or he's just going to die to hero powers.
Yeah, but how does he pull ahead on the board? He doesn't seem to have any good method for doing that. Again, he's got the Hadronox. Not that many taunts have even been killed off yet, though.
The two main lines of play he could consider now is going for an early Hadronox and, I don't know, hoping that it's enough. Maybe his opponent doesn't have the removal, because he could just go Hadronox and Spellstone on his opponent's copy of Dire One Matriarch. But I think what I like a little bit more is being a bit more greedy with his taunts, because it's not like waiting for his opponent means he will be more likely to draw the bad card. Akawonder has drawn and played the card that's bad for Sjow in the Cornered Sentry. Nothing could really go that much worse for the moment for Sjow, apart from the quest starting to be completed, which is now only one taunt away from Akawonder being able to start really turning up the heat and killing Sjow an awful lot quicker.
I mean, a second Cornered Sentry is something maybe in the back of Show's mind. A 1 in 4 is a little bit better than a 1 in, what, 7?
Yeah.
So there's that, but I agree with you. It's not a good spot to be in. I think he's waiting for the Lich King before he plays the Hadronox, because then at least he can get one more big card like that to get him a Death Knight card, maybe a Frostmourne or something big to swing himself another board state, or at least get the game a little bit more in his favor. There it is. There's a cube as well, okay.
And this is where the more creative style of play with the Taunt Druid is something we're going to have to see coming out. And I know that's definitely a style of play we've seen quite consistently from Seiko, a player who has been very creative with his cubes in the deck list, being able to give him huge boards from the likes of Trog Gloomeater. I think we also saw in the quickest series of DreamHack Summer so far from Sixo, where he kind of cubed a Lich King against a Recruit Hunter, and he just won in like 3 seconds or something.
Oh, wow.
Like that, from what we actually saw on stream. But going for things like this is what he's going to need to do, because Sjow needs to form a game plan where he doesn't rely on resurrecting Hadronox, because that will not be good enough. Well, 3 times out of 4, because he will simply be resurrecting a Raptor instead. So coming up with a much more consistent style of play, where he's able to make one big board or a few big boards that his opponent won't be able to kill off through the use of cube not on a Hadronox, I think is a very smart way of going about things.
2 copies of the Witching Hour now in Show's hands. So it's now a little bit more likely to get a second copy of Hadronox. Not hugely more likely, but if Hadronox's first one dies before a second corner potentially comes down, Sjow gets 2 chances, right? He gets the 2 1-in-4s, Witching Hour into Witching Hour, which is marginally better odds than he had earlier. Death and Decay isn't great in this matchup for Sjow. I think it's across the board, probably actually the best Death Knight card, but it's not looking too strong here.
Yeah, it allows him to play a lot more aggressively, I suppose, which it's actually pretty good because the money. Okay, so what I was looking at the start when he drew it was if his opponent plays Phantom Militia, being able to go Death and Decay, swipe face into Branching Paths, but obviously that's 1 mana off being able to actually work, but he needs to start formulating some kind of a plan like that where he is able to go for a big burst combo, I think, to close out the game. Because again, relying on Hadronox is not good enough at this point anymore.
Oh, that weapon's strong.
Yeah, it's truly disgusting. And Akawonder very, very easily able to clear off the entire board here. And maybe now for Sjow, given that his offensive with the taunts he had naturally has not worked, he will simply have to rely on 1 big board from Hadronox into maybe a Naturalize on this turn. But again, whether or not it's actually worth it is another question. He has just played a cube, so the downside for Akawonder of just leaving up the Hadronox does become,
true,
you know, a lot less. It's a lot less dangerous because his opponent has played a cube. So the downside of leaving it up, they've just played a 9-mana 3/7 at that point if they don't kill it off.
Okay, so
I mean, what else does he do?
exactly. Sjow is taking a good look at his hand before he makes any decisions, but I would be shocked if Hadronox isn't played this turn. And I don't think the Naturalize gets played on it, and he can always follow up with that later if he doesn't draw the cube next turn or something, I guess.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I mean, for 2 reasons. Like we've mentioned, Akawonder might just have to kill it off because he's afraid of the cube. And also because drawing your opponent's card is actually really bad here, because it seems like from where Sjow is sitting, I think he would be able to make the read that Akawonder is out of taunts. Obviously, that's no longer the case because 1 was drawn off the top, but giving his opponent cards means that he would almost certainly be able to complete the quest on the following turn.
Regardless, here we go. It's the execute into the brawl that I mentioned about 8 turns ago. The way that Akawonder cripples Shjow's entire game plan. And Sjow is going to have to rely on getting a Hadronox back from one of these 2 Witching Hours.
Yeah, and the fact there for Akawonder that he decided to go for the swinging with the Shadow Morn instead of a hero power means he obviously loses a charge, takes 3 extra damage, but he gains 14 armor, which I have to imagine is probably worth it in the end.
Yeah, he can even shield slam that away if he wants to, and he does.
Indeed. So for Sjow here, he's got 2 1-in-4s, and as I only got a B in my GCSE statistics, I'm not going to try and guess what the overall...
I can tell you it's not 2-in-4. It's lower than that. All right, attempt number 1. No.
Swing and a miss there for Sjow on the first one.
The problem is now, because he didn't play both at once, it's now even worse odds next turn because this one's going to die. And
it's even more worse. It's a 1-in-8 now.
It doesn't help that Akawonder has now drawn the Cornered Sentry. He can just play it immediately, Hero Power or Blood Razor it away. Yeah, 1-in-8. I would have liked to see Sjow play both of those Witching Hours immediately. Even forgetting the Cornered Sentry top deck there, it would have been better just because this 1 extra Raptor won't be dead in the dead pool. But yeah, this is bad.
Okay, Houmpst ever. Oh. Akawonder, that is not a real word, just in case you were wondering. Akawonder has completed the quest, but this is not necessarily, as we've seen from a lot of Taunt Warrior games, this is far from a guaranteed victory. Completing the quest does not equal winning the game. It's not like Quest Rogue, or the old school Quest Rogue, I should say, where once you completed it and you didn't lose on the spot, you usually just won. In this instance, because he's got a very small hand size, no card draw in his hand, it could be the case that if Sjow is able to put together even just a reasonable sized board, nothing too impressive, he might be able to withstand it until the point where he can go for swipe Branching Paths lethal. I'm trying to find some way that it comes together for him, and obviously it's not looking great, but it looks like it's going to come down to the Witching Hour, which almost inevitably, he misses again. And this is now looking incredibly dire.
I mean, if he won that 1 and 8, then that would have been crowds outside going nuts.
That would have been juicy Jeffrey Brucey to the absolute extreme.
And it looks like, against all of the odds, Akawonder might just pull away with his first win of the series. Meaning that his chances are looking a lot better. Again, we've looked at the rest of the lineup. We've said that Aka has a solid chance to defeat the rest of the decks. So maybe there is a glimmer of hope for him to get his guaranteed spot in the top 16 as we head into the rest of this series. But Sjow going to keep playing this out. I really can't think of any way that he wins from here, though.
Yep, he does have himself a copy of Carnivorous Cube, which is, as we've consistently seen, one of the highest cards, highest value cards we currently have access to in Hearthstone. As you know, if you go for Cube on a Hadronox, you're very unlikely to be losing. But for Sjow, with nothing really worth copying or eating off of the Cube here, I suppose, I wonder how likely it is to even work out whatsoever, as Akawonder is finally going to be starting to deliver hero power after hero power, almost undeniably closing out the game. Ornery Direhorn, obviously great. You don't want to go for the Mastodon because then you can't hero power at all.
He's also got, yeah, he's got all of the taunts he wants as well. Phantom Militia. Probably only going to want to play 2 in 1 turn for the same reason. He's going to want to be hero powering every single time. Dragon Hatcher, sadly for Sjow, doesn't have any dragons left in the deck. I'm fairly certain at this point. We've seen both Drakes and Sleepy Dragon. He's coming down anyway, just to sit there as a 2/4. 9 mana 2/4? Ooh, don't think I'd play that in my deck.
Have we seen Sleepy Dragon actually? I think we did actually.
We saw so many Sleepy Dragons in the last game.
It's all blending together, yeah.
Fluffy, Snuggles, Fetch!
Yeah, there we go. Nothing really left there. Akawonder, however he wants to approach this, as long as he doesn't let his opponent get too far ahead, because, you know, he doesn't have any armor gain left at the moment, so what he has is very valuable. But even having said that, he's at, what, above starting health total, so he's just at absolutely no danger of dying.
Does have 31 health, exactly. It doesn't really need armor gain at that point. Obviously, if Sjow could come up with another big board and actually have a means of dealing lots of damage, even, once again, if that's Death and Decay were actually a Frostmourne, maybe he'd have a way back onto the board, kill one of Akawonder's more powerful minions, then cube it. There's stuff that he could have done, but Oakheart, at this stage, not going to do much at all.
Pretty cute play from Akawonder as well to go for the Liquid Membrane on his dinosaur there, because it protects it against the likes of Swipe, Naturalize, and Spellstone, all of which could be a little bit scary to clear it off. That means he's going to be moving towards lethal, I would imagine, even quicker than he would have done beforehand.
Onward, friends!
As Sjow truly demonstrates why Master Oakheart is so ridiculously broken in Druid.
Well, at least one card came out of it, something that's not useful in the slightest here. But hey, there you go. As Akawonder can make any play he wants as long as he presses that big red button next to his hero portrait. Everything's going to turn out okay.
There's ways to optimize it, you know, isn't there? Like, how does he want to preserve this Ornery Direhorn as much as possible? Because it is a valuable minion here for clearing the path for his upgraded Fireball hero power to close out the game. But yeah, like you say, it really makes little difference here, as it looks to me like Sjow is going to be gearing up more and more so to find a secondary deck to take down this Taunt Warrior. I would have to imagine it's going to be the Even Shaman over the Odd Rogue.
Okay.
It's not necessarily a given, I suppose.
I don't believe it's going to end up mattering too much either way, as Sjow only needs to win one game. He's going to get both chances.
Oh, okay, I suppose I should say, I think he's more likely to be taking the victory with his Even Shaman than his Odd Rogue.
I mean, I might get a Rinda waving an angry fist at me in a minute, but I don't believe it game score affects the tiebreakers unless it really goes deep into the third or fourth tiebreaker or something. Anyways, finally Akawonder takes down that Taunt Druid, enough of its suppression. And Sjow, yeah, he's going to have to beat that Taunt Warrior just one time, and you think the Shaman is the way to go?
Yes, I would definitely agree with it. We've seen pretty consistently from Shaman from the even Shaman, I should say, sorry, decent upsets. You know, they're on HS Replay, it shows it as being pretty decidedly favored for the Warlock. I was looking it up with Muzzy while we were sitting in the audience, and I think he had it for, I should say, with Warlock. I'm using that as an example for AoE-based decks, where it has having Defile and Hellfire. It's like a 70% matchup for the Warlock. So with the Warrior, where it also has the likes of Brawl, Blood Razor, Warpath in particular, a heck of a lot of board clears, I imagine it should be favored on paper. But we have seen here at DreamHack Summer, there's something in the air that's giving even Shaman the juice that it needs to take these games, because it's just finding those board states where it has one big minion, a few small minions, and the board clears just don't quite line up.
All right, well, first, though, Sjow is going to go with the odd rogue, as we get to by back of the Moon-Eater appearing in the opening hand just there. Not something we've seen too much of over the last couple of days. We've seen a few odd rogue games, but it's one that has the potential of ending very, very quickly. He's got Firefly, Blink Fox, and Cold Blood. Oh, yes. All in the opening hand, ready to go. And Cold Blooding Fireflies does seem to be a pretty common play over the last few days. Yeah, it is just, ever since Ungoro has come out, that's been one of the best things you can do with this deck. It feels so truly fantastic to start turning up the pressure so devastatingly quickly, because, I mean, for Akawonder here, even with being able to go for the Cornered Sentry on turn 2, it doesn't help him that much. Sjow can just start turning up the pressure using those Raptors. For once, they have turned from his greatest enemy to his greatest ally, as that sounds like a great script for the next Jurassic Park movie. Raptors, this time they're cool. On another note, Darek, I've got some pretty big news from the show floor. Hit me. Pool 8 is the only undefeated player in the DreamHack Swiss, and will be the only undefeated player with a score of 8-0 in the Swiss, with a game score of 24-10. That's pretty good. That's a good game score. That is a pretty good game score. We was looking for a little while there, like Seiko would be joining him, but I think he went from 6-0 to 6-1. Unfortunate, obviously, that he was unable to do so, as he was looking to be on an absolute tear, one of the best players we have here at DreamHack Summer. But in this particular match, as we saw Sjow putting up, you know, a pretty reasonable stand-up against the power of Cornered Sentry here, he's still not all too far ahead, which is not a position you want to be in against this Warrior, because the Taunt Warrior, now that it is such an unbelievably low-curving deck, only having, what, 1 8-drop, and then it goes straight back down to Brawl. It's a straight jump from 5 to 8, and then everything costs 5 or less. They can only draw so badly. It's not like the old-school Taunt Warrior days, where they would be drawing cards like Curator, Primordial Drake, the young Direhorn Hatchling right at the start. They instead just draw well every single time against aggressive decks, and that's looking to be the case here, where Sjow is going to have to really start putting up a much more impressive board than this if he's going to be able to fight back against Akawonder's defensive teams. I do like the use of the Varspine Slayer on the Acolyte, though. One of the ways that the Odd Rogue, and really any deck, can sneak a slight advantage in front of the Warrior is by just denying any of the card draw. Like as you said, it is a low curving deck, which means the individual cards don't tend to be as valuable. The Acolyte card draws are necessary, and by taking that tool away from Akawonder, Sjow has given himself more time to get his aggressive start onto the board. So now for Sjow, unfortunately not the true devastating power of Fungal Mancer to really ramp up this power and start pushing for some good damage. But this is perfectly reasonable to start fighting back on the board for the moment, just hoping that Akawonder doesn't have the ability to keep up the removal here, but it's looking like he's just going to be keeping up with all this pressure. We could see, I'm not even sure, Blood Razor into, actually no, Warpath would be a bit too much of an overcommittal. You want to save that for a board clear, but making sure you're drawing with the Acolyte is basically, I think, something that Akawonder really needs to be considering on this turn. I wonder. Yeah, Sjow had no means of removing the second Acolyte easily, so this is going to get Akawonder, I guess, as much or as little value as he likes. I do like the look of that Warpath that you mentioned a moment ago. Just 3 extra draws from the Acolyte seems good. Clears up almost everything except for the Scalebane.
I think the almost everything is a very, very big addendum you have to add on there.
True.
Like, leaving up a 5-1 Scale Bane is very scary indeed. 5 damage you're taking. Now another minion you have to remove after it gives a buff on the following turn.
Still not removing it, though.
Yeah.
That's an issue.
So he is instead going to be going for Warpath and Blood Razor. It gives him the highest amount of ability to clear the board on this turn, I suppose.
Yeah.
But is it...
Okay, so he's still got the 3 draws from the Acolyte. Yeah, he sort of had to waste the Warpath as he only got to use it once, didn't take advantage of the Echo effect. But as you said, the Blood Razor is on its own able to clear up the Scalebane next turn. And Wonder does have Shield Block, he does have Shield Slam. He will have tools next turn to do a little bit more.
I'm trying to think through in my head, though, if going for triple Warpath on its own was just simply better, because you could get 3 draws off the Acolyte there. Which you got anyway.
Yeah.
But you managed to keep up the same amount of card draw. You could get the, I believe, the Scalebane down to 2 health and everything end up the same, or maybe it would end up the same, but basically you've used a Warpath 3 times and you can just equip the Blood Razor next turn anyway. Maybe this is worth it because it's a slightly quicker play, because you can go for the 2 damage and Death Rattle on this turn as well. But either way, for the moment, Akawonder is looking to be in a reasonable position, I suppose. But Sjow has picked up himself one of the oldest of schools of smart cards in Mortal Strike.
Yeah, not exactly what you'd expect in an Odd Road deck, but I guess it's a pretty good fit. Any means of getting some extra burst damage and filling out a curve, it's even, so you can do some weird stuff. But that Cyanide Chain Gang is another roadblock for Sjow. Very awkward number 3 to get past over and over again. SA7 Agent almost gets there. The dagger on its own almost gets there. Cold Blood helps a lot, obviously, and thanks to the double SA7 Agent, Sjow was able to get over that, but he didn't actually deal any face damage this turn. And that is definitely key, as Akawonder picks up Tar Creeper, so he's got a lot of ways to defend himself, as we see Shield Bearer as a potential option for Akawonder. Just another thing in the way of Sjow going face.
I think Shield Bearer is only really a card you choose if you had Quest in play, because it's such a bad card in terms of actually removing what your opponent's doing, because just stalling isn't enough. There's still a few cards in your opponent's hands, so the Fell Soul Inquisitor seems like a much nicer play for me. It's going to be removing a little bit, or at least damaging, so that your Warpaths and Executes get a little bit more valuable. But again, if you had the Quest in play, a 1-mana activator on that would be very powerful. Here, though, I like the Fell Soul for the lifesteal a little bit more.
Sjow just not going to have a way past these taunts this turn. He can play the Immortal Strike if he wants to. He could play the South Sea Deckhand, I guess, but we're talking inconsequential bits of damage going face here. Akawonder is sort of at that point where he's stabilizing now.
He's sort of at that point, but he's also sort of taking 6 damage from SI7s.
Yeah, but he's got the Phantom Militia next turn. That's 3 more taunts with 4 health. Show's going to struggle to get past that. Then another Phantom Militia potentially the turn after. Also, the 2-mana card is able to gain Akawonder 6 armor whenever he wants to play it now. 3 minions is probably the best he's going to get from that, so I like the idea of playing that immediately. And hey, Brawl is fine too. Even if an SI7 Agent survives, Akawonder has still gained more health than he's going to lose from the next attack.
Yeah, this play, obviously it's more vulnerable because you're going to be taking damage on this turn, whereas if you'd gone for triple Phantom Militia, you are very unlikely to be taking much damage at all, if any, on the following turn. But what this does do is it basically protects you against Fungalmancer, I think is the main thing, whereas if you'd gone for Phantom Militia and he buffs everything up, that's maybe a situation in which you lose at that point. Whereas here, being able to go for Phantom Militia when the board is a little bit less scary, I think is probably slightly safer.
Should squeeze in the 4-drop as well, if you would like a slightly safer play with a little bit more health, but Akawonder just doesn't think it's necessary. This is squeezing out more value in the long run, and hey, if he's not going to die now, there's no harm in doing that.
I mean, Fell Soul Inquisitor is like such an innately bad card in terms of its stats that an extra 2-4 taunt is almost better.
True, true. Just getting to the face this turn. Akawonder dropping 3 more Phantom Militias next turn would be a big problem for Sjow, who doesn't have any board clear potential whatsoever in the deck. He's just relying on having better minions than Akawonder is.
Yeah, it's looking more and more like Akawonder's just going to run away. The stabilization point maybe wasn't quite hit before, because if Sjow was able to hit something like Fungalmancer or
okay, yeah, sure.
I don't know, maybe even Baku itself, and it wasn't able to be cleared off by Akawonder, then you're in the situations where maybe Sjow could start to put together a board that can stabilize. But for Akawonder here, now, as you mentioned earlier, it's definitely feeling like the stabilization point is quickly being reached.
With the Dry Whistle again, or Dry Whisker, because he gains 6 more armor. There's 3 minions on the board one more time.
Yeah, I like this a lot more. I think with the combo of being able to go for something like Cornered Sentry into the Cornered Sentry into the Dry Whisker Armorer into maybe Brawl as well, but probably that's a little bit of an overplay, a bit of too much of a fancy play syndrome you're going for there. This is perfectly good. He doesn't need to rely on a Brawl. He can just play his minions here and he should be able to remove everything. Because he still has Phantom Militia, and Phantom Militia is just a lockout. Like,
yeah, I mean, Sjow has now drawn Baku, you mentioned earlier. If Sjow got it earlier, managed to stick it earlier, it may have done something, but Baku can only attack once per turn, and Phantom Militia, well, there's 3 of them. So, as you said, complete lockout. Akawonder may be getting his 2nd win in this game very, very soon. And potentially leading into a reverse sweep.
yeah, and also it's worth pointing out there are certain draws for Akawonder which do just like end the game on the spot. If he can get the Death Knight for all that removal, then that's looking absolutely fantastic for him. And you know, Baku is still a pretty big threat for Sjow, but Akawonder with the combo, as I mentioned, of Cornered Sentry, Armor, Brawl, puts him at so much health, very likely that his opponent will be left with nothing all too threatening whatsoever. And even if
Baku lives,
the Henchman Thug or the Baku survives.
Oh!
Baku does actually survive.
It doesn't matter though, because again, it can only attack once per turn, and 3 Phantom Militias. The problem that Akawonder's facing at the moment is that over time, Sjow is starting to outvalue Akawonder, and Akawonder does have the potential of just drawing the quest at some point.
The quest would just, the quest would be an unbelievable oh my god. That was like the 2 worst things that could happen, one after the other for Akawonder.
Well, at least he's got 3 ticks on it. The best I can come up with right now. I cannot believe this.
Surely this can't be the case that Show's going to win.
But if Sjow draws something like Fungalmancer now, he just completely dominates the board. Okay, that's not quite Fungalmancer.
It's good though, it clears the board for Akawonder. Like, what does he do? The Death Knight, if you can get Scourge Lord Garrosh, sorry, obviously it would be kind of nice because it starts to squishy up this board, but he's still taking more damage from Baku the Moon Eater.
I cannot believe what is going on here. Okay.
It's still looking good for him. He can clear this off. He heals for 2 each turn. There is Scourge Lord Garrosh, and now he's obviously wishing
he slammed the other
slam on the Baku instead. And you know, I'm not trying to be results oriented here. It would have worked out much better in the vast majority of other scenarios.
Wow, we're going to have to play the Whirlwind instead. Save Garrosh for next turn when he can play it with the hero power to guarantee the clear on the Baku.
Because especially like if Sjow plays any minion here, Akawonder can very likely only take like 2 damage this turn. Or 1 or 2 damage because he'll obviously attack into that minion instead.
The positioning matters here. If he's playing the Diamol as well, it has to go the other side of the Baku.
Oh yeah, that's true. So what? They have a 1-3 on board. You don't really lose in that scenario still. But the change of the change over to Whirlwind Hero Power is not necessarily better whatsoever. It will allow you to clear off a lot of the minions on board, but there probably won't be any minions on board because you will have the weapon to be able to take care of them instead.
Yeah, this is one of the things Garrosh does very, very well, is just prevents your opponent from putting anything on the board. Now Fungalmancer isn't looking like it does that much at all. The Sjow just has to rely on his 2-2 weapon. Okay, for a second there, it looked like Sjow was actually turning a corner.
I mean, if Akawonder just gets a minion here, he wins.
Yeah.
Serenite Chain Gang will probably be enough to push enough damage in combination with the Scourge and the Blood Razor. Obviously, Stonehill Defender would be very nice. He has played both Phantom Militias. Warpath's not exactly it. I'm kind of staggered that this game is still going on.
All right, Akawonder not under so much pressure that he feels the need to do anything about this mole, though, quite rightly so. Fungalmancer, if Sjow drew that a little bit earlier, would have made a massive difference on the game. But right now, it just dies to the weapon, so he's going to have to hold on to that. Akawonder has another shot to draw a minion to get him out of this and get Slam without the ability to draw anything from it.
So it does now... I don't know, does Akawonder kind of cut his losses, go for the attack in on the Diamol? It feels like it's tremendously unworth it to me, especially as getting this damage through to face at a later point with Scourgemorn, or sorry, with the Shadowmorn, could be surprisingly valuable. But there's Leroy, which brings it up to
11.
8, 9, 11, 13 damage on this turn. Oh, he obviously can't play the Leroy in the same turn.
Yeah, that's the issue. But next turn, Leroy is looking very lethal. Shield block helps Akawonder. So shield block into a minion is massive. But where are his minions? He's just not drawing them.
So there's 10 damage on the following turn available for Sjow. Obviously, Akawonder will be trying to take absolutely no damage on this turn.
Yeah. Execute will help with that. He can execute the mole and slam the Fungalmancer if he feels so inclined.
If, however, he decides to attack in with the weapon here, that's lights out. Because the upgraded dagger with the deadly poison and Leroy, but I think Akawonder knows that's such an obvious break point, 6 damage from Leroy, that he can't afford to take that risk. However, only 2 damage off of Lethal here. Both SI7s have been played. I believe there might still be a South Sea deckhand in the deck available for Sjow.
Wait, holding our breaths to find out what this draw is. It's a Diamol, it's 1 mana, but it's not the right one. So it just gets played out, and Sjow once again has to hope that no taunt minion comes from Akawonder.
He just needs a taunt.
Okay.
Tar Creeper is, I'm pretty sure, a taunt.
I think so. I think that's sort of the point of the minion, actually, yeah.
Pretty big facet of it, to say the least.
Akawonder just works out. What is the best way of dealing with this Diamol? Slam hero power doesn't seem too bad from where I'm sitting, and just stick up the Tar Creeper.
Yeah, I mean, you have to play the Tar Creeper on this turn is the main thing you're looking at, or you just die to a Leroy from hand. However, it does still give the ability for Sjow to win through Vilespine off the top, I believe, obviously being able to go Leroy Vilespine and then exactly 8 damage to be able to close out the game. So going for draw here, I think is pretty important to try and find another taunt minion. But Akawonder is almost out of cards.
Does he just not have any other taunt minions left in his deck? This is crazy.
I must choose.
So yeah, Leroy into Vilespine with the weapon swing would be lethal this turn, you're right.
Is Sjow, with his Oddbow, going to fatigue Akawonder? What has this series of Hearthstone been? As with Vilespine off the top, it would be a lockout and Sjow would be advancing through to the top 16. He's not quite able to get there still. And it looks like Akawonder is actually getting surprisingly close to win with his own reverse lethal. The final card left in his deck, I'm trying to think what it could be. I think he's played both Chain Gangs, both Militias, both Tar Creepers, but he's played also all the cheap removal cards in his deck. Hopefully for his sake, it's just some kind of a minion.
At this point, we are going to have to wait and see. The Sjow puts down what few minions he can, and it's Stonehill Defender, one of the best minions that it possibly could be. This may just be the value that Akawonder needed.
He just needs anything that can attack. Like, for any reasonable amount of attack value, because he wants to close out the game on the next turn. He can attack for 3 here, and he will have the second charge next turn, so he just needs 3 damage and Sjow to not draw a taunt through the likes of Tar Creeper, and he will simply be winning the game.
That being said, anything that can die to Leroy will die to Leroy, and then Show's Firefly and Flame Elemental can trade into the 1/1. Well, no, they can't because the Tar Creeper's in the way.
What now?
But again, for Sjow, still some good draws off the top if he doesn't end up dying. For example, Vilespine Slayer would still be able to put him in a respectable position. Akawonder clearly just wondering, is it worth in any instance going for hero power first? I don't think so, because the full 7 mana may be needed to get a scary enough minion as Gem-Studded Golem cannot attack because he will not have any armor, so he has to simply go for the Dread Corsair so he can play it right now. However, if it survives, it's good enough.
That's a real shame. Gem-Studded Golem was looking so good for a second there, but as you said, the fact that it's not able to attack does severely weaken it in this specific situation. As Argent Squire, not the draw that Sjow was looking for. Has Akawonder finally managed to find the win here?
I think he has.
I think he has as well.
Right at the final hurdle here. Sjow has got Akawonder through to fatigue. I have to question if Akawonder maybe made some kind of a mis-sequencing with his brawls in the mid-game. Obviously, he was playing very aggressively with the likes of... I mean, he made the play I said that I thought was way too much of an overcommittal on cards of going for Cornered Sentry into Dry Whisker Armorer, into Brawl. Obviously, it was the worst possible outcome for him in the Baku survived. But I think maybe if he'd been, I don't know, more preservative of his minions, keeping their health total alive, he wouldn't have ended up in this scenario where Sjow is able to get this close to lethal. But unbelievably, Akawonder is able to bring this to 2 games apiece. This is the most nail-biting match. The win and in. The player who wins this will be advancing through to the top 16, and it's just 1 match left to decide it.
This is the weirdest series of Hearthstone. We've had Cube Warlocks trying to out-taunt Druids. We've had Odd Rogue trying to fatigue a Taunt Warrior. I don't know what is going on here, but finally to end this series, it is going to be Sjow's Even Shaman versus Akawonder's Taunt Warrior. And as we were talking about before that previous game started, Derek, you were telling me you believe that this is Sjow's best shot to take down the Taunt Warrior.
Yes, the Odd Rogue, generally, you're just going to be facing too much of exactly what we saw. He's going to be needing, you know, with the Odd Rogue, there's too many taunts, too much removal, too much armor gain in the way, and he still managed to come incredibly close. But as for Sjow here, the difference here is that any minion you can stick is a massive threat in this scenario. The likes of Flame Tongue Totem, Direwolf Alpha, even Earthen Might, just these small little minions and buff spells that he has to really ramp up the amount of damage means he will be able to get a good amount of pressure in the early game. And Sjow's list is also fairly top-heavy. He's got a Kalamos the Primal Lord in there, in addition to Alakir and obviously Hagatha the Witch as well. So he should be able to take it a little bit further into the late game as well, assuming that Akawonder does not simply run away with hero powers.
What do you think of Kalamos in Even Shaman?
I think it's very inconsistent. Personally, I'm not a fan of it because I feel like the upside of activating it is good, but it's not absurd. It's like you have to really structure the way you're playing your turns, and obviously it's an even deck, not an odd deck, so you have no turn 7 plays exactly, if you get what I mean, with elementals to really smoothly curve it out. But clearly Sjow thinks it's worth it. And in a matchup like this, where you can just smork your opponent for some extra burst damage, heal up to get out of range of the fireballs, make a nice wide board, although you probably wouldn't go for the 1/1s, or just go for a removal against the likes of Stonehill Defenders or Saronite Chain Gangs. It's a very versatile card.
So in the short term, things are looking very good for Sjow. He's got the Knife Juggler, he's got the Primorphin Totem to stick, he's got more totems, he's throwing knives to the face. Great. The first real flaw in Sjow's hand comes into turn 4. Corpse Taker will not have its Wind Fury, which is really the strongest thing about a card, but unfortunately, when Alakir is drawn, that's it. No Wind Fury for the Corpse Taker.
Yeah, a little bit unfortunate. Outside of that, it will pretty much just be a Silver Moon Guardian, I think, in this particular match. Obviously referring to a 4-mana 3/3 with Divine Shield. The Taunt can be useful to draw maybe the weapon charge away from one of his opposing minions or something like that, but it's really not the absolute best case scenario you're looking for.
Yeah, I mean, by the looks of things, the weapon has to go straight into the Corpse Taker here, which just gets rid of the Divine Shield.
Yeah.
And I guess the 1 health thanks to the Death Rattle. But still, I would say things are looking a little bit more favorable for Akawonder here. He's got the Acolytes if he wants to play one, draw a card with the Whirlwind effect on the go. He's got Tar Creeper, Stonehill Defender. He's full of options.
Yeah, and he's going to be not suffering from what he was suffering at the end of the last game, where he simply doesn't have enough cards together in the combinations that are necessary to make them work. Because on this turn, we could, for example, see Acolyte of Pain and attack in with the weapon. It's not perfect, because obviously the Divine Shield means it will not be a complete clear on this Corpse Taker, but clearing off the Knife Juggler would be pretty nice, and keeping up the card draw is pretty important.
Really taking his time with this one. Obviously, each of these are quite tempting choices, as it looks like he settled for the Acolyte, but we have been debated by Akawonder already once or twice this series. There we go.
Yeah, this is definitely my first port of call. I mean, it's what you do when you have Acolyte of Pain and Blood Razor. You want to be getting the Death Rattle to activate, or the Battle Cry ideally, if you can get it to stick the turn prior, to get that card draw rolling, because then you can go for your plays like Blood Razor or Whirlwind to execute. You can make more draws happen with Acolyte of Pain and things like that.
I can't help but wonder if that Whirlwind will have been tempting last turn if Akawonder had more time to think about it, for the extra draw on the Acolyte, for the more even trade against the Corpse Taker. It's definitely something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I imagine it will probably be a bit more useful on one of the later turns when it's really important to clear something off, because in terms of card draw at the moment, he's really not lacking, and he might be able to go for a play exactly like this.
This looks good
where he
now.
just lets it rip on the following turn, draws 2 extra cards. And in this scenario, even if he is afraid of overdrawing, I really don't think it matters all too much. He's found Scourge Lord. Garrosh,
yes,
he's pretty much got the ability to complete the quest right now, I believe, in hand. Or actually quite easily if he gets the full Phantom Militia Echo value. So yeah, any card he burns off the top, even if that comes to it, is not that important.
Yeah, Garrosh is one of the most key cards, I think, in this matchup, and really against any of the aggressive decks. It's nice that Scourge Lord Garrosh has finally sort of come into his own, as for a long period of time, the card was just not played in any of the metas. But it definitely does seem comfortable in this deck, which is a bit of a surprise, as we have the quest that changes the hero power as well. You wouldn't have thought naturally that the 2 hero powers work well in synergy together, but hey, it definitely seems to work out. If Akawonder can get there, as Fire Elemental has put Sjow into a dominating position. Yeah,
that's the thing. We've been talking about how good Akawonder was looking because, again, full 10 card hand he's got here. Good amount of armor gain available on the later turns with Dry Whisker Armorer, and the ability to complete the quest. But for Sjow on the other side, on the Even Shaman, good amount of pressure he's got here. If he is able to find a Flame Tongue Totem, I believe, in particular, he will be able to really start turning up the heat here and delivering a very scary amount of damage. So for Akawonder, kind of the main detriment to his game plan at the moment is, while he has the ability to complete the quest eventually in hand, he doesn't have the time, the mana available to play these taunts, because it's very scary plays. If he puts all his eggs in one basket of one big taunt and he gets hexed or something like that, that's a good amount of damage if in combination with a Flame Tongue that he will be eating up with his face. And he's clearly not exactly sure how to handle it. So many cards in hand. These are some of the hardest turns, as instead he is just going to the play I was talking about, where it's pretty blooming scary. He's going all in on these taunt minions. If Sjow is able to find value trades, it's still going to be demanding removal on the following turn for Akawonder, and this is exactly what Sjow was looking for. Opportunities where he can take these strong value trades, still keep up a good amount of damage on board, whilst not having to commit too many of the cards from his hand, so he just runs out of threats.
We've seen a lot of this in what's ended up being a very tight series between these two very well-known, very popular, very successful Hearthstone players. We've seen a lot of them waiting for the last possible moment to make that decision, because they have been difficult games. They're difficult decks to play. They're difficult matchups to play against each other. They're having to take into account so many different considerations. Also, knowing their opponent's deck lists is something that they have to... I mean, they're having to stretch their memories at this point, I imagine, to remember all of the individual tech cards. It's not easy.
However, for Akawonder, the risky side I was saying of playing out his forward two is kind of outweighed, now that I look at it, at the fact that if you actually look at what he has in hand, in terms of removal spells, he's only got Brawl and Shield Slam. Shield Slam is very ineffective at the moment. So these are very, very valuable cards to him at the moment. The removal cards that he needs for things like Fire Elemental, Kalamos, Alakir, Sea Giant that we see there as a full 8/8 in all its glory. But what he does have is plenty of minions. So putting up roadblocks for his opponent, taunt minions thrown in the way, is really not that bad because it just slows his opponent down a little bit to the point where he hopes he can get the full Scourge Lord Garrosh value.
Yep, and in the meantime, just gaining 10 armor from a 2-mana card is a pretty good way to help himself get there. What does he do with the rest of this turn? I guess it could be a Brawl again. Brawl's not looking too bad at all here. Problem is, if the Sea Giant survives, if Akawonder's played the Brawl, he's not going to have that 1 mana required to use the Shield Slam to finish it off. So safer to do it this way, save the Brawl, just put an extra taunt down. I think this is much better.
Does, however, mean that at any point from here on in, as I mentioned multiple times, any buff card, Flame Tongue or Direwolf, is pretty scary indeed for Akawonder to have to deal with. All these small all these small totems are very innocuous at the moment, but could become very scary indeed at any point. And any situation where you have a tense board and only taunts are protecting you, you know there's the possibility for your opponent to break them down and deliver a lot of damage through to face, which is kind of what was almost Akawonder's undoing in the last game, is that his taunts were not enough. Sjow found a way through, and when he started delivering that damage, the armor gain that Akawonder actually had access to was surprisingly limited. There's not that much armor gain in this deck, especially after you change your hero power.
Yeah, and on top of that, Sjow just has such a valuable hand. He's not going to run out of steam anytime soon. Even if Akawonder does brawl away this board, it just doesn't matter. Alakir, Fire Elemental, even Gen Greymane are all nice little refills onto the board bit by bit.
Pretty unfortunate here for Akawonder, or I suppose I shouldn't say unfortunate, but pretty nicely positioned here by Sjow, that he has managed to put the Taunt Totem in a position where a hit from Scourge Lord Garrosh's Shadowmourne would be remarkably ineffective at actually dealing with anything on the board. So Akawonder, having to take another turn before he can actually get value out of that, having to go for what is actually a pretty good plan B. This clears up the vast majority of power on the board, really not too afraid of anything he's facing down right now, and still has a pretty good suite of answers to deal with anything that Sjow could throw down. The only thing I can see that Akawonder's really missing out on here is single target removal. Something like an Execute or a Shield Slam, in my opinion, would really put him in a good position to take this game.
Yes, that being said, especially with the Death Rattle of his Blood Razor ready to go, the Shadowmourne will be enough to clear up that Fire Elemental. Healing Totem does do some work here. It means it won't be a full board clear, but I can definitely see Garrosh coming down this turn and the weapon going straight into the Healing Totem, clearing up everything except for the 2/2.
It would definitely look that way to me as well. The kind of the benefit of storing up mana is such a thing that we've realized is so valuable in Hearthstone over the years. The original use for that was weapons, because obviously if you equipped, say, a Fiery War Axe or a True Silver on turn 2 or 4, the next turn you didn't have to spend any mana and you could still get yourself a clear board. And now we obviously see that as well in the likes of Skull of the Manari. But in this particular instance for Akawonder, being able to go for Garrosh now, get that weapon equipped, what it gives him access to is playing out his taunts on the subsequent turns. Here he's not going to be going for it. Instead, maybe, I'm not sure, too afraid of weapon removal to go for it.
Yeah.
Because there is, as I take a look at Sjow's deck list, very likely to be a copy of Ooze.
No,
but there isn't. There's no weapon removal in the deck at all.
So I guess he just believes that there isn't enough pressure on the board to get past this anyway. He can perhaps stall out for another turn, deal little bits of damage to what's already there, then follow up with the Garrosh after, follow up with a Brawl if the board state gets too wide. Something Sjow's really got going for him now is the ability to play Alakir and the Earthen Might. He'll also be adding a random elemental to his hand because Alakir is itself an elemental. But more to the point, it's a 5-attack Wind Fury charge minion, which is going to do a lot of damage to everything Akawonder has.
That is a good point, and maybe setting up preemptive taunts is worth it, but at the same time, there's multiple benefits to go for the Scourge Lord Garrosh play. As I mentioned, you can kind of store up the mana on this turn and still use attacks on the following 2 turns to keep the board clear. And also, it means that Flame Tongue Totem off the top or in hand for Sjow would have much less value because there'd be no totems. It would also mean that the ability for Sea Giant to be played on that turn would be much less likely because there's way fewer minions actually in play. And I mean, the upside here for Akawonder is becoming apparent. So maybe this was his plan all along, trying to bait his opponent into going for too aggressive of a play into the board and follow up with a brawl. But I don't know. Even then, I would definitely like to have seen instead perhaps the
Garrosh.
The Garrosh coming down just for that extra value from the weapon.
Regardless, Brawl looking very good now. It looks like Akawonder had this board covered one way or another. And again, as long as the Sea Giant doesn't survive, Akawonder's looking like he's in a good spot. Even if the Sea Giant does survive, there are ways that Akawonder can follow up. He's got Saronite Chain Gang, he's got Tar Creeper, but I will stop myself right there, as now he's going for the Garrosh by the looks of things.
I mean, this does make sense. He can sequence this pretty nicely, I believe, by going for...
He gets both Whirlwinds as well,
Yeah, exactly,
right? Okay.
yeah. If he needs to consider when he wants to play the second one, because he obviously wants to be able to attack into a totem rather than one of the 8 attack minions and be able to take out both of them at the same time.
That's fine, though. He can just attack into the 2-3, and that will almost clear everything, but then with the trades with the minions, it will clear the Sea Giant as well. So he'll take 2 damage, but it's not the end of the world. Okay, that worked. I can't help but wonder why he's holding on to these brawls for so long. I really can't see them getting any more value than that until later on.
I think in this instance, it was just a much better play. Like I just didn't see, if I'm perfectly honest, how powerful he could make it work without having to take the 8 damage from one of the large minions as well. I still think I would have preferred to have seen Scourge Lord Garrosh on the turn prior. But then again, maybe I'm underestimating how good Garrosh can be in the later stages of the game to, I don't know, maybe clear the path for some of your taunt minions to attack face. But regardless, Akawonder is incredibly close to completing the quest here. Sjow is absolutely nowhere near being able to kill his opponent in terms of minion pressure. So he's going to have to completely reevaluate what his game plan is here. What most of his turns should be thinking here is, unless he's already come to a conclusion of it, is how do I win this game? What do I do? What game plan is it? Is it relying entirely on Hagatha to win the game through spells? Is it to go super all in on one board because I don't believe my opponent has Brawl? Is it to slowly drip out my minions? And clearly here he's thinking one by one, trying to bait out removal from my opponent is the way to go about it. But I have to be honest, it's looking more and more scary for Sjow.
It would be pretty naive of Sjow, I think, to think that Akawonder doesn't have Brawl or any of the other board clears at this stage in the game. Warpath as well being one of the main players. And you're right, Akawonder has stabilized once more. If he wins this, will be a complete reverse sweep with the Quest Warrior just coming into its own and showing how good of a deck it can be in capable hands. Argent Commander not going to do all that much at all against this wide wall of taunts. Alakir not looking like it does all that much either.
Yeah, nothing really doing here. The Shimmering Tempest gives a random mage spell, I believe, instead of a random class spell.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
So it won't give shaman spells, it will give mage spells.
Flame Strike.
Which, Flame Strike, Pyroblast, I don't know. I don't think there's really anything at the moment that can quite deliver it now that the nonsense of infinite Kabbalist tomes has rotated at them. Not even a slim chance of that really getting the job done.
It's as you said moments ago, I think Hagatha really is the only draw from Sjow that even gives him a chance to win this game. Hagatha would have done great things to this board, clearing both Saronites and always clearing the Stonehill Defender. And many shaman spells is better than one single mage spell.
I would agree with you there. Usually, you can have as much totemic mites as you want, not doing anything. But I think the other real avenue for victory for Sjow is that we have seen from Akawonder, at least in my personal opinion, maybe some slight mis-sequencing of his removal at certain points, or at least not in the way that I would personally go about going for it. So if he ends up putting himself in a scenario like against the odd rogue where he runs out of threats, maybe Sjow can stick a board, but as I say that, I just don't really think that's ever going to happen. Akawonder can't really lose this game at this point, even when his opponent is simply playing 4-mana 3/3 taunt lifesteals, which suck. Just equip the Sulfurous at some point soon. Get those fireballs through.
This turn is fine, right?
Yeah,
equip it and start blasting the face. It's already back down to 17, and that's just the hero power alone.
And it does look to me like Akawonder of SK Gaming and Spanish fame, a real personal favorite of a lot of the fans we have here at DreamHack, is going to be advancing through to the top 16 unless a real miracle can happen for Sjow. And I'm happy for him. He's a nice guy to talk to at these events. Sjow obviously not out of the running for top 16 yet. He will be falling down to 6-2, which means it's all up to his next game as to whether or not he can qualify through to that all-important top 16 stage.
Yeah, but it's difficult to doubt Sjow and his great abilities as a player. Again, he's about as old guard as it gets in Hearthstone. His stream has been around since before I was involved in the Hearthstone scene whatsoever. He's always been a big name, and for good reason. He is a very, very good player, and when he puts his mind to it, he is one of the best at competing.
He is indeed. These decks have not been what he is most traditionally known for, I would say. Obviously, Control Warrior being, at least in the old school, what he was most well known for, most proficient at. But he's piloted his decks with real prowess, and I think he can hold his head high as he dukes it out in one final series in the next round of Swiss. But for Akawonder, huge congratulations. His lineup is looking remarkably strong. The super slow control style of decks, Q-Block in there, Taunt Quest Warrior in there as well, and the Token Druid maybe looking like the weakest of all those decks, but still a strong contender.
This is certainly Akawonder's moment. He will be making it through to the top 16 cut that we will start casting later on today. But as you mentioned a moment ago, Sjow has one more round of the Swiss to earn his entry point. Again, it's worth mentioning at this point, as Akawonder very passionately explains his gameplay to Sjow, as he often does. Pool 8 is the king of the DreamHack Summer Swiss, coming in so far undefeated at 8-0. Obviously, there's one more round of the Swiss left. He may be able to go 9-0, but either way, just a great performance from him all round. No other player has the potential of going undefeated. And 24 wins, 10 losses is his overall in-game record of the tournament. Derek, isn't that just incredible?
It is absolutely amazing. Dare I say, potentially contesting Ike's perfect run through a DreamHack. I'm sure he will have something to say about that to me on Twitter. How you doing, mate? But I cannot wait to see who else we start to see in these top 16 brackets. A lot of very strong players still, I believe, in the running. The likes of Muzzy has been winning series after series. Obviously, we'll have to catch up with them outside afterwards to see who is still in with a chance. But basically, all those guys in the F2K Tempo Storm practice group who have clearly all pooled their resources together for this tournament are looking good. I'm obviously talking about Glazer, Fino, Ball Control, Muzzy, and Saiyan. I think they're all in with a shot still.
Well, we are not going to have to wait that long to find out whatsoever. There is only one round left of the Swiss today before we will be leading into the top 16. I cannot wait to get there. Do not go anywhere. Round 9 of the Swiss coming up next.